Mary stood before the house, just soaking it in for a moment. There was no way this place was just some fabrication. It seemed impossible that it would fit inside the wagon they had seen the other day as it went up the street. The front steps led up to a long, sweeping porch, complete with rockers and little tables with empty drinking glasses covered in cobwebs. The front door was huge and ornate, a knocker shaped like a grinning skull in the middle, and when Mary went to push it opened on its own and expelled a great deal of smoke along with it. It was likely supposed to be very spooky, but Mary couldn't help but laugh a little as she walked through the cloud and into the house. Did it do this for every guest when they opened the door? It must have cost them a fortune in fog liquid for whatever machine they had hidden back there. It got thicker as she went inside, and what she found on the other side was not the set piece from the Addams family she had been expecting. What she found was her parents' living room, complete with the same shag carpet, wood paneling, and ancient furniture that had been there since her grandmother had left it to them. What the hell, Mary thought, as she walked into a near-perfect replica of her family home. Is this some sort of weird, subjective horror housewife kind of thing? She didn't know, but she heard laughing from the area that would be the dining room and went to investigate. Looking at the dining room was like watching one of those old shows from the 50s, complete with black and white filter. Sitting at the table, all dressed like they were out of an episode of Leave It to Beaver, were her parents, her older sister, and her younger brother. Clark was still in his football gear, eating through the slits in his helmet, and Claudia was dressed in a graduation cap and gown, looking a little more normal than Clark as she ate. Her parents were laughing and talking animatedly to them, and as Mary took her seat, nobody seemed to notice. This was a strange sort of haunted house, if it was a haunted house at all. Mary had never seen anything like this, and she was a little concerned that she might be having a fit or something. They all talked to each other, none of them sparing a glance for her, and this was far from something out of Mary's nightmare. This was more like a case of same stuff, different day, as Jazzy would have said. Mary had always felt as if she were an extra in her own life. She was smart, like her sister, but not quite as smart. Claudia was going to Dartmouth, but she had graduated 2 years before with a bunch of scholarships and grants and chances to succeed. Mary's grades were excellent, but she hadn't found it as easy to get the same kind of support that her older sister had gotten. Not to mention, their parents had thrown a college fund behind Claudia, something they had made it very clear that they could not afford to do for Mary. It's just not possible, Mary. Maybe you could start somewhere smaller and get some scholarships or something. That was the same story she had heard with her younger brother. Clark was an athlete. He played football in the fall, baseball in the spring, basketball in between. He ran track, too, taking the school to second or third at many of the meets he went to. And for that, he had colleges already making offers once he graduated. Mary wasn't just smart, though. She was also athletic. She took gymnastics, was excellent at softball, and was a solid member of the swim team. But her parents didn't have money for 2 sports teams to run at the same time, and Clark had the better claim. It just wouldn't make sense to have Clark miss a season because you want to play softball, Mary. If you want to get a little job and pay for it yourself, then that's fine, but we can't afford it, and this is Clark's future we're talking about. So, Mary had always been the ghost in her own home, someone who haunted the lives of those who were more important. Mary got up, not quite sure what all this was about, and went to the door that would lead her to her room. She was getting a little tired of this, and whatever the hell it was trying to tell her. And if this was her home, then she would just go haunt her room like usual. Instead, she stepped out into the hallway of Hamburg High School. The people walking by were familiar, but she couldn't have said their names. She knew them as faces in the cafeteria, voices in class, the shoes in the hallway. She walked the halls as she did most mornings, books held against her chest as she made her way towards the cafeteria to meet her friends. Whether this was still the house or something else, Mary no longer cared. It was too familiar to be denied, so she went about her day as she had every day since the 7th grade. She found them in the cafeteria, sitting around the table by the corner. There was Jazzy, her hands doing more talking than her mouth, which was saying something. Mark, looking bored as he watched her tell a story, and Reggie, who was sitting with an arm around her and laughing warmly. Her friends were the only people who really seemed to see her, but when she sat down, she saw the same black and white film descend over them. They didn't acknowledge her, didn't look at her, and when she tried to talk, Jazzy just talked over her, like she wasn't there. She suddenly felt like the people she had passed in the hall, a collection of sounds and shoes and nameless faces. It was sobering to realize that you were haunting your own life. Mark walked up the lane of games in the fair area, hands in his pockets. He was alone again, but that wasn't anything new. Mark usually felt like a third wheel, and he imagined that Mary felt the same. People, sometimes even Jazzy, asked him why he didn't just start a relationship with Mary, and he supposed that that would have made it easier to handle. They could have gone on double dates. She would have followed him around and given him someone to feel close to. But it wouldn't have been fair to Mary, or to Mark. Mary wasn't the one that Mark was waiting for, the subject of his unrequited fixation. Step right up, shoot the ducks, win your prize, beat today's high score, and win the big prize. Mark looked over to the man behind the shooting gallery and had to double take. It looked like the guy they had bought the tickets from, but this version was in a pinstripe shirt and a round-topped hat with a circular brim. He was grinning hugely, offering out the pellet gun for Mark to take, and opening his hands for his payment in the other. Mark passed him $1, grinning as he took up the gun and waited for the man to activate the shooting gallery. The lights came on as he looked down the sight, and as the ducks wafted by, Mark let fly. They fell just as quick, too, yellow and green ducks with little circles on them. A quail flew by, and Mark put it down, too. He missed the second quail, but he hit the third, and by that point, the lights were going out, and the man was clapping as he came back around. Excellent, excellent, my boy. Second place is no mean feat, he said, as he tossed him a stuffed dog. Second, Mark laughed. That was damn near perfect shooting. Can't believe I didn't get first. Sorry, my boy, the man trumpeted, commiserating as he indicated the little placard, but you were close. Mark looked up, and sure enough, he had missed it by 5 points. The revelation, however, wasn't what made him stop. The name in the first place spot was what had caught his eye, and he thought it must be a coincidence. R.A. was next to a perfect score, but Reggie was on the hayride with Jazzy. R.A. must be someone else. His Reggie Andrews was somewhere else. He started to walk away, but suddenly the idea that this R.A. was better than him was unbearable. Another one, he said, handing the barker another $1 as he prepared to shoot. The barker nodded, pocketing the money and setting it up again. Mark shot wonderfully again, but he couldn't seem to get all the quail when they came around. Pretty soon there were 7 stuffed dogs on the counter, and Mark was shaking as he handed the man another $1. Sir, it's okay to be second best. Don't let it... I said another, Mark yelled, physically stopping himself from turning the pellet gun on the man. The barker nodded, and when the third quail came out this time, he had him dead to rights. The quail, however, had other ideas. It veered out of the way as the pellet slapped against the back wall, impotently, and Mark slammed the gun down as he turned towards the man. It was a cheap trick. They had changed it somehow, and now he was gonna... The barker was gone, but there was another dog on the counter now, its collar proclaiming consolation prize. Mark took this one, walking off as he thought about the strange feeling that had come over him then. Mark would have thought he'd be used to being second best. After all, he'd been playing second fiddle to Reggie since the 6th grade. Whatever the competition, Reggie always seemed to come up ahead. Football, basketball, track, baseball, it didn't matter. Reggie always beat him, and Mark had never minded that. He didn't mind losing to Reggie, though it hadn't always been that way. Mark had spent most of the 7th grade silently loathing Reggie and his athletic prowess. Mark was used to being the best, to being the one to lead the pack, and coming to Hamburg had been an eye-opener. His goal for 7th grade, after losing the spot of first running back to Reggie the year before, had been to best him. They had been not enemies, he supposed. They were rivals. They challenged each other. But at the end of the 7th grade, when Reggie had handed him his number and told him to keep in touch over the summer, Mark had been gobsmacked. "You're a cool guy. I look forward to hanging out with you next year, too." Mark had realized then that the rivalry had been one-sided. Reggie had considered them friends, not enemies, and he had buried his misguided hatred of Reggie, if it had ever been that serious to start with. In truth, it had been something else that led him to hate Reggie, something that stoked the fires of his anger more than losing. "Hey there, kid," someone yelled, and Mark turned to find another barker, this one in an apron with a little paper hat. "You want to try some deep-fried delights?" This series of lookalikes was becoming a little jarring. Mark wondered if this was some kind of family-run carnival or something. Surely it wasn't always the same guy, right? "Nah," Mark said, hesitating as the delicious smell hit his nose. "I don't really eat anything fried." "Ah, I won't tell anyone if you don't," the guy said, winking as he held out a corn dog that was about twice as long as usual. Mark felt his mouth water as the smell of the fried food assaulted him. How long had it been since he'd had a corn dog? 10 years? Maybe 12? It had been before Dad had started insisting on their routine of physical health, that was for sure. So that meant it had been before his mother died, the catalyst for most of the things he now valued, or at least the things his dad valued. Mark tried to resist, but the smell was just too intoxicating. The first crunch was like heaven in his mouth. "Been a while?" asked the barker, and Mark nodded as he ate. After his mother's death, Mark's father had become obsessed with perfection. He and his son began to work out at 6 a.m. every morning, and they didn't finish until 7:30. Then Mark would eat 2 eggs, lean sausage, and 2 bananas. For lunch, he had a protein shake. For dinner, it was always some new nonsense, super greens or keto meals or something with a lot of protein and nutrients. Mark only understood a little of it. His dad had become a nutritionalist, or so he claimed, and he knew all kinds of things. But he knew that it got him in shape, and he knew it gave him an edge. He knew that edge was tenuous. "Want another?" the man asked, and Mark realized the first one was long gone. Mark licked his lips, his belly begging for more. "I better not." "What's the harm?" the barker asked, smiling as he produced a second corn dog. "You can always get rid of it later, right?" The corn dog stopped halfway to his mouth. "What?" Jazzy laughed as another of the scarecrows popped out of the corn. "They aren't very scary, are they?" she asked, leaning against Reggie as they rode in the back of the wagon. "Speak for yourself," Reggie said, jumping as another one leapt out of the corn plants. "Oh, you're just a big old scaredy cat," she teased. The line hadn't been too long, and they had offered to ride the two of them since they weren't in a group. It had been nice of them, the driver reminding her of the barker from the front gate as he told them to enjoy the ride. It was a little romantic, the two of them under the moon on the hayride, or it would have been without all the sudden leaping scarecrows. Reggie jumped again, and she stifled a chuckle. Reggie had always been jumpy. Even when they were kids, he had been very sensitive to things like horror movies or haunted houses. Jazzy had met Reggie when they were in 2nd grade, but apparently his fears were something from when he was smaller. None of his family seemed to want to talk about it, but Reggie had told her it had something to do with his sister. Melody had been 5 years older than Reggie, but she had died when he was 5. No one ever said how or why, but she was dead, and Reggie had seen it happen. It was something that haunted him to this day, and it was a topic that she was careful not to bring up. He wouldn't talk about it, but it was clearly always on his mind. She had seen him at night sometimes, on the nights his parents were away and she stayed over, the nights he had the dreams. He would wake her up, tossing and turning, calling out for his sister as he groaned and reached for her. She wanted to wake him up on those nights and ask him what was going on, but she didn't dare. He would tell her when he was ready. "I wish we could ride this a little longer," she said. But that was when she noticed how stiff he had become. She looked up and almost pulled away from him. Reggie was sitting up like a statue, his eyes locked ahead, and Jazzy was afraid that he had been seeing something that was too much for him. She looked over, but there was nothing there, not even one of the scarecrows, and his head was cocked a little to the side. His mouth was open slightly, his teeth almost chattering, and the sight of him like this made Jazzy scared. "Reggie? Reggie, what's wrong? What are you—" "Melody," he breathed out, and when he stood up, she fell against the side of the wagon. "Reggie!" she yelled, but he was already jumping out of the wagon and shouting his sister's name as he ran off into the corn. "Reggie!" she yelled, hopping out of the cart too and going after him. The corn whipped at her face and arms, stinging her as she chased her love, following him into the limitless field of yellow and gold. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.